All right. Hello, everyone. My name is KB. I'll be doing today's workshop. I have my video on here just real quick here in the beginning, just so we all get familiar. Today, we will be going over Python and Salesforce. Whoops, stop, wrong one. Let me present here. Okay, we'll be going over a little bit about Python, a little bit about pip and pipenv, and how we can use these to integrate with Salesforce. And we are going to be using the simple Salesforce library. It is third party and it is open source and available here on GitHub. These slides will also be available in the demo repositories that I'm going to share with everyone. So yeah, let's just go ahead and jump right in. A little bit more about me. I was hired back in February. Was hired as a developer or software engineer. So I've been with Oktana about 6 months now. Um, Before Oktana, I was doing web development for a digital marketing agency. It was mostly PHP and WordPress, a lot of styling, a lot of JavaScript, and a little bit of Python there. Um, as for hobbies going before that, I've also been into a little bit of hacking and security related things. If you guys are interested in that, this website, hackthebox.eu, is a fantastic source. It's like a VPN. They have labs you can go and do stuff. I've also had articles featured on hackaday.com. More recently, I've gotten into 3D printing. And the very first things I did growing up was I first got into robotics and embedded systems. I started with the Parallax and the basic stamp, writing PBasic, and then I quickly moved on to Arduino and AVRs, and more recently Raspberry Pis. So enough about that. We will get straight into Python here. Um, Python is interpreted and interactive. It's not compiled like other languages. It's closer to be compiled on the fly. When you install Python, it comes with its own interpreter, and that interpreter is what runs your source code. And we can interact with that at any time. And once we get into the live demo, I'll show a little bit more about that. It includes a lot of libraries and a lot of core features built in. You will often see reading about Python, it says batteries included. Because the standard library gives you a lot of things out of the box, like interacting with the operating system, network libraries, just a bunch of different things. Um, Python also comes with something called pip, which is used for package management. You can think of pip just like npm if you're used to JavaScript. It's just like Ruby gems, or if you're on Linux, like the apt and apt-get, it's the same thing. And we could also use something called pipenv, which is just like pip, but it creates a virtual environment. And virtual environments are really, really good because they keep everything contained within its own little space here. That way, when you start a new project within a virtual environment and you go to install all the dependencies and requirements, that's all bundled together within that project. So when you go to deploy it, it's going to pull all of those with it, and you don't have to worry about different dependencies or different versions being mismatched and things of that nature. It makes deployments really easy. Python syntax is really simple. It's often touted as being closer to like pseudocode or just like written steps. It uses basic terminology, and it's really easy to get into. It's often regarded as a very good beginner language. It's the one that I started on all those years ago. But yeah, it's really simple, and there's many different ways you can use it. There's frameworks for web applications or just websites using like Django or Flask. We'll be going over Salesforce today, visuals and reporting. Automation, I'm sure we've touched at least a little bit on Python in previous workshops. I'm sure a lot of those tools are using Python. And it's also very, very big right now for machine learning with frameworks such as TensorFlow and PyTorch. And you could even use it with robotics and Internet of Things. They do make an embedded version of Python called MicroPython that you can run on like actual AVR chips and interact with the real world. So here's a quick little example of some syntax and what Python code itself looks like. The first thing to note here is the indentions. These indentions are required because, as you can see, there is no curly braces covering this code block here. Everything is scoped by these indentions, which I think is actually really nice because it keeps code really clean. And if you start trying to mix up these different indentations, things are going to fail. Like right here where it says my var, you can't have space, space, tab, and then down here just have 2 tabs. Things will fail then. It is dynamically typed, like up here, x equals 10. We don't have to initialize this variable with a type. We don't have to say like int x equals 10. We don't have to be like integer x or double x equals 10. It's dynamic, and anything you assign a variable will be automatically typed to that data type. Same thing here with this little list that we see. We don't have to declare this as a list or anything. It's just automatic. That can be cause problems down the road if you have like a lot of different people working on something. Um, uh, but for the most part, you won't have any issues. Let's see here. So after seeing a little bit of Python, we will jump into the simple Salesforce library that we'll be demonstrating today. And this quote here was pulled from their GitHub repo here. And just like it says, it's a way to interact with the REST API using Python. Um, it does show here that it's using Python versions 3.3, 0.4, 0.5, and 0.6. But the demonstration I'm going to be using uses Python 3.7. So going forward, this should be compatible. And it does provide an interface to the REST resources in the Apex API. And something recently, it also gives us access to the bulk API, and we'll be demonstrating that as well. And it's returning a dictionary as a JSON response. Now, this is also really nice because when we do things and interact with our org using Python, it's going to return us native Python data types that we can work with. And we won't need to worry about converting the JSON or anything into a Python data type. That's done for us. Makes it really easy to interact with our org. The only things that we need is our username, a password, and a security token. And from this little snippet we see here, this line, the from simple Salesforce import Salesforce, that's just pulling in this library. And to create an instance of our org so we can interact with it right here, all we have to do is just call this library here, simple Salesforce, and pass it our username, password, and security token. And after that, this SF object allows us to interact and do anything we need to with our org. We can do SOQL queries. We can do DML statements like insert and delete, and the bulk API is also included. Now to get these pieces of information, your username, when you click on your little icon here, your little face here on your org, and you go to settings, you should see your username and your personal information here. Now for your password, you should know your password, so I'm not going to show how to go about getting that or resetting it. But the security token might trip up some people. I know how to Google it to even figure out where it was. But when you go to your setup, from Salesforce to setup, or no, this isn't setup. You also click here. Sorry, you click your face here, and also it'll be under settings. over here in the personal information, you'll see reset my security token. And once you click the reset security token, it's going to send you an email with your new token. So we're also going to have another quick word here on pip. Like I said before, it's just like NPM or JubyRems or PHP Composer, or if you've ever used Homebrew on Mac, it's just like that. All of the packages and frameworks and everything you install from pip is coming from a website called PyPy. This is Python's officially supported server where they hold all these libraries and frameworks, just so they can be vetted and tested and have everything in one central location that's officially supported by Python. And that's where pip is pulling things from. pipenv also pulls from PyPy, which for most of the time, that's fine. That's what you want to use. But like with this little demonstration I'm going to be doing, while I was developing it and creating it, there was a new feature added to the simple Salesforce library, and that's living on GitHub. So the GitHub repo was really up to date and had the feature I wanted, but PyPy didn't. The version on PyPy was behind GitHub. So when you do pip install or pipenv install, it's going to pull that old version. But let me go back here. The beauty of pipenv or pip is you can install packages directly from a repo. It doesn't have to be GitHub. This could be hosted on Assembler or GitLab or Bitbucket or anywhere. But you can install a package like it was coming from the server, but you can have it point to GitHub instead, which is really, really nice. And that's what I had to do. I can show you the pip file when we get into the live demo here, and you can see that it's pulling from here. Okay. So installing the demo that we'll be going over here in a minute is really simple, and pipenv helps make that really simple. So just with a couple of commands here, we've pulled down our repo and started a shell. So right here, we just git clone the repo, it clones it down, we change it into that directory. And so now we do pipenv shell, so it can be dropped down into our virtual environment. This is important because if you're not in your virtual environment and try to run things that's in your requirements, it might not work. So after we get our shell up and going, the only thing we need to do to bring in all of the dependencies here is pipenv install, and it'll go out and it'll look for and get all of the dependencies and requirements for this specific project. It will also, if a certain version of something is required, it'll go out and get that specific version. And for the demo here, like I was mentioning, you need the username, password, and token. Instead of hard coding those as a string inside of the Python script, I put them in their own login.json file. And the reason we're going to be doing this is for security. And I'll touch a bit more on that once we get into the demo. So speaking of which, we are now set up to do the live demo. And I will hop over here. I'll close this out real quick. And first, I wanted to show a bit about how and why Python is interactive. So when you install Python, it comes over just like any other program that's installed to your computer. It is an executable. So we can just run Python. And now this is that interpreter I was talking about. It's using Python 2.7, but that's fine. See, right here, we can write code like we normally would. And we can run it and it'll print it out. And just like the dynamic typing, I'll go ahead and demonstrate that now. You see, we don't have to make this an integer or anything. It's going to automatically do that. So x equals 10, y equals 5, and we'll make z equal to x plus y. So print z. And this is all interactive. And you can create your functions here, like test me. It's a test. See, just within this interactive window, within the interpreter itself, we've defined a function, and now we can call it within the interpreter, and it should run. It should print this is a test, and it does. Good. But that's just the way Python works is when you want to run one of your files here, you call Python and then the name of that file. And what's going to happen is Python will read over your source code here. It'll tokenize everything and compile it down on the fly and run it as each line goes. So now that we have gone over a bit of the interactive stuff, I wanted to show this is an example login .json here. And again, the reason we're doing this is so we can put the login JSON into get ignore because we don't want to push this up to GitHub or anything public. If we didn't have this login .json in the get ignore, my actual login file would go to GitHub and it would be open to the public, to everybody. So it's normally a pretty good practice to put any sensitive information in a file outside of your script here, and that way you can add it to things like get ignore. But there's really, in the real world, there's nothing stopping us from just replacing this line with our actual username as a string and everything. I just wanted to show people for security reasons, because this isn't Python specific. Any language or anything you work on, if it's going to be viewed by the public, try and do something like this. All right, so for the actual demonstration here, I also have an org set up. We will be messing with the accounts object here. We could do this with a custom object. Anything that Salesforce supports, we can interact with. But I'm just using the accounts because it comes by default. If you have your own developer org, you could also follow along. So we're going to be messing with the accounts. So the first thing we will do is drop down into our virtual environment, pipenv shell. All right, and as you can see, we are now within our virtual environment here. So the first thing we're going to do is run our script here, and we're calling it app.py. And the way I set this script up is it's going to run some things and then it's going to pause. That way we can talk a little bit about what's going on here. So the first thing it's going to do before I hit enter over here, it's going to import the libraries that we need, most notably simple Salesforce. This p print here is only for output. This isn't really needed. It's just, it stands for pretty print. It makes things a little nicer over here in the console. And we also have to import JSON because our file here is in a JSON file. So what we do is we open the JSON login file, we load in the credentials, and then down here, just like in the slides, we're creating this SF object, and this represents our Salesforce org. And just like in the slides, we're assigning the username to the creds login username, same thing for password, and same thing for the security token. Now the first actual bit of code that we're going to run and interact with our org, we're going to do just a simple SOQL statement. We're going to get the ID and email from all the contacts here. And we just made this a string, and we are telling our org here, sf.query, we're going to do an SOQL query, and we're passing it that string right here. And now this is going to return everything to this data variable. Sorry, my headphones cut off on me here. So everything will be assigned to this data variable, and this is also another little example of a for loop, a for each loop. So for each piece of information within the data records that it returned, we're going to print out the ID and the email here. Go ahead and hit enter. So that did exactly what we needed it to. We got logged in, this SOQL statement executed, and it's printing out exactly what we want it to right here. So now the next thing I do when I hit enter to get past this pause, we're going to generate some mock data. And like I said, we're going to work with accounts. So the only required field in accounts is the name. So we'll have an empty list here and another example of a for loop. So for each item between 0 and 1,000, we're going to create a new record. We'll create what Python needs to send it, and we're just going to add it to this data list here. And it's going to print out this data list, and you'll see what that looks like. Now, when we print it out, we're not actually creating any records here. We haven't passed anything to our org. We're just creating the data that we're going to pass to it. So I hit enter, and just like the script shows, we created 1,000 different records here. So the next thing we're going to do is insert them, and we're going to use the bulk API for this. So what it's going to do is take our object, we want to use the bulk API, and we want to do this on the account object, and we're going to insert them. And this data here is everything over here, and we're going to do it in batches of 10,000. Now, obviously, we don't have 10,000 records here, but we could have up to however many the bulk API will support. And we're also telling it to use serial, so these will be processed one at a time instead of several of them at a time. And once we insert them, Salesforce is going to return us some data to tell us if anything went wrong. So we'll print out everything that Salesforce returned to us. So I'm also going to jump over here. I'm going to do a refresh just to show that there's nothing in here yet. We've only created the data. We haven't inserted it yet. So we still only have the 12 items here. But once we hit enter, it's going to take just a second because it is hitting a remote server. So it's going to take a second. Yep, there it is. And this is all the data that Salesforce returned to us. And looking at this, we can see that created is true. That's good. This errors here is an empty list, so we didn't have any errors. Also a good thing. It returns us the ID of the record that we created, and success equals true. So now when I tab back over to here and I refresh, we should see a lot of different accounts now. And we do. All kinds of bulk tests here. It doesn't mean anything, but we know it's working. So that's good. So next up, this is passed. We're good. So when I hit enter again, we're going to get all of the records that we just inserted so we can show off deleting them as well. Now, since what we need to delete a record is its ID, you'll see it down here. And yeah, we do have the IDs of these new records created, and we could just use this return data to go back and delete everything. But I wanted to show off a bit more that we could also use the bulk API also for our queries here. So what we're going to do, we're going to go back and hit the API for, we're going to select the ID and the name from all those account objects where the name is like this bulk test here. If you've used SOQL before, the like, you should be familiar with it. It works the same way here. So here's our query. And you can see here, we have the Salesforce object we created. We want to hit the bulk API. We want to use the accounts, and we're going to run the query. Now here with accounts, like I said, we could use a custom object. So if you had something called account XXC and you created this object, this will also work, but we're just going to use the accounts for now. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and we will see what Salesforce returned us. So it did what we wanted. We got all of the accounts. You see we queried for the ID and the name. So we have those here. We have their ID and the name. And you also see a new one called attributes here. Now this attributes is what comes from simple Salesforce, the library that we're using. And this isn't really needed for what we're doing, but sometimes it is nice to have because it'll tell you what the record type is. We're just using the accounts here, and it'll also tell you the URL that it used to get that information. This is the API endpoint that it actually hit to go and get this information. But it looks like it did work. We're getting all of our bulk test here, and this is exactly what we wanted from our query. So we're good to go with that. Now, the next thing we're going to do in order to use this delete method down here, it's expecting an array of IDs, like a key value pair here of the word ID and then its actual value. So what we're doing here is all of these accounts that we got, we're going to pull out this ID and put it into a new array with just this information. So when I hit enter again, it's going to go through all of the accounts and it's going to append them to this account IDs array as the data that we need. And it's going to print it out and we'll be able to see what that looks like. So this is what it looks like. It's just like the library wants us to use. We got the ID key and we have its value here. So the next thing we're going to do, and before we do this, I will run back over here. I'm going to hit refresh again. Our data is still there. All we did was create a collection of things we want to delete. We haven't actually done that yet. So when I hit enter here, that's what's going to happen. It's going to take that SF object. It's going to use the bulk API. Again, we're using the accounts, but this time we'll use the delete. And the same thing, we're still going to use batch size of 10,000 and we're still going to use serial. And then it's going to print out what Salesforce returned to us. So I'm going to hit enter. This might also take a second because we are using the bulk API here. Good. You can see created equals false, that's good because we're not inserting anything. We're not creating anything. We're removing it. So that's good. That's false. We still have empty errors here, which is good. It also still returns us the ID of what was deleted, and success equals true. And as you can see here, the end of script has been hit. So this little script demo here that we have is complete. We will come back over here and do a hard refresh. And just like that, everything that we just did is gone now. So I think that is all I wanted to talk about with simple Salesforce and Python here. And as you can see, more than half of this is just comments. This could easily be done in less than like 10, 15 lines of code. And what's nice about this is since it is native Python, we can integrate simple Salesforce to any Python project we have. We could have a script that would sit on a Flask server and go hit different APIs and gather a bunch of data and send all of that to Salesforce. We could take data outputs from machine learning models and insert those directly into Salesforce, all within Python here. So we will come back over here. There we go. Present. And that was it. That was a really quick workshop. In the future, I could do, if anybody's interested, I could create like a Flask API or some other more advanced project with Python and have that integrate with Salesforce if you'd like. We will also have a blog post, a written text version of this workshop. It should be coming out next week. So yeah, I think that is it. So does anybody have any questions? Questions, comments, concerns? Anything I need to go back over? Anything confusing to anybody?
There doesn't seem to be any question, KB. It was an amazing presentation. Good to see it's so easy to connect both of them. So great explanation. Thank you very much, KB.
Yeah, thank you. And also, I will say this demo here, I will go ahead and paste it here in chat for everybody. It is the GitHub repo of this script that we were just working with, and the slides are also in there. It's a PDF version of all the slides that we're using. And I'll do also have a little README here with how you can install and get this going. So yeah. Well, if that's all, I think I will go ahead and go. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, KB.
Thanks, KB.
Thank you. Good presentation.